We'll be right back.
Is the growth of government driving you crazy? Is it frustrating you that you can't do anything about it? Now you can. Join the Free State Project. Move to New Hampshire and get active with other liberty activists who have already slowed the growth of government in New Hampshire. Go to freestateproject.org.
Ron, you mentioned when Richard Nixon closed the gold window and severed the final tie between the dollar and gold on August 15, 1971. I remember so clearly. I was driving in the square in Hillsdale, Michigan, and I felt like a bolt of lightning had hit my car when I heard that news. I couldn't believe it. And so I know it had a big effect on you. Didn't it lead you into your public career?
Yes, and of course, many of those announcements came, on the weekends, and that was a Sunday night. August 15th was a Sunday night. Not only did they close the gold window and default on that promise, they put a 10% import tax on everything that came into the country, and put on wage and price controls. What struck me, I mean, the monetary stuff was pretty bad, but what really struck me was the next Monday morning, I attended a little legislative council of our local Chamber of Commerce, and the Chamber of Commerce came out for it, and I thought, what's going on here?
Yeah, true.
And not only that, is the stock market went up. It went up, at that time, it went up the most in one day ever. It went up like 34 points. Percentage-wise, that was a big jump. And I said, either I'm crazy or the world's crazy, because this is not good news. And, of course, those of us who had been concerned, won that argument, because look at what happened during the 1970s. But I did get interested in public policy through economics and especially monetary policy, and that was a strong motivation. Of course, that sort of, developed into my deep concern for personal liberty and a lot of interest in foreign policy and monetary policy and debt. But when you think about it, it all comes together, on this. I think if you defend liberty, you want a sensible foreign policy, and you want a government to act sensibly. And if you believe in liberty and markets and honesty, you can't believe in a Federal Reserve System, and you can't believe in the system of counterfeiting. So I, over the years, have tried my best to understand it and simplify it so that people would say, that makes sense. And it really isn't that complicated. And now that all the bad ideas have come to fruition and we see so many problems, at least they're looking. They're asking questions. Just this last week, I had 2 or 3 guys on the floor come sit down and talk to me about, what do you do with your money? where do you invest it? Do you buy gold? And I said, yeah, well, isn't gold too high right now? I mean, it's $900. You can't buy gold. So, but it's interesting, and it reminds me of what Leonard Reed used to talk about a lot. He would say that you ought to learn your material the best you can. Eventually, they'll come and ask you questions, and that is good. They'll listen to your answers if they ask the question. But if you sort of push yourself too aggressively on somebody, you really turn them off. So I'm delighted that people now at least ask questions. And Lou, just recently, I had one member come to me a couple of months ago, and he sounded so sincere about learning more about the Fed. He says, what one book would you read? And I said, well, in order to understand the business cycle and what went on, one of the books that impressed me the most was Murray's book on the Great Depression. So lo and behold, he came to me this week and told me he got it. He says, I'm reading it now for the second time.
Wow.
And he was just really fascinated with that. And I always considered that he was probably, just sort of mainstream Republican, and so many members are like that. Some of our supporters will paint everybody as evil and monstrous, but I see them as people who are just sort of molded by, current events and current thinking and what they've learned in college. But if there's reasons for them to look for different answers and they get a little bit of guidance, I think many of them will change their opinion. And I sense that is coming now, just because what the government's been doing is such a failure. And that's why I think the young people are so alert to this. They see the failures of government, and they're more honest with themselves and saying, hey, this sounds like a bunch of baloney. I don't believe that stuff. And then when they hear a little bit about how the market really works, and you've seen it and have heard it and recognize how people are reacting on the campuses. But you had a lot of responsibility for that and have changed people's mind. The other day I stopped on my way to Wake Forest on my way to Washington. We had 1,300 young people turn out.
Wow.
And the loudest cheers came when I talked about Mises and the gold standard in the Federal Reserve. But they knew Austrian economics. They know these terms. But interesting enough also, Lou, Bettina Graves was there visiting. So I thought that was pretty fascinating, too.
She's a great lady. And, Ron, you mentioned, of course, correctly, the link between the Fed and foreign policy. And certainly the horrendous wars of the 20th century that killed so many millions of people never could have been fought without central banking. Bush never could have fought his Iraq war without the printing press. So they've got the printing press. They're talking about Iran. They're talking about Pakistan. I mean, do we face another war? Is Obama going to take us into yet another war?
I think what you say is absolutely true, and that is what you see. They spend too much money, conservatives and liberals, even on war. And then there's debt, and the Fed is required to buy that debt and monetize it and cause the inflation. But right now there's something even more going on, and that's why this audit of the Fed is so important. And that is they're involved in foreign affairs, too. It is the foreign operations, foreign discussions, foreign agreements that are absolutely prohibited from becoming known to the Congress. They do have no obligations to tell us one thing about it. So we now know that they're involved in the last year or so of extending credits, guarantees, and direct credits to the tune of $2 or $3 or $4 trillion. We don't even know. But these go to central banks. They probably go to big corporations and kind of things that we don't even see. So they're involved directly in foreign policy, as well as subsidizing the foreign policy that Republicans and Democrats promote out in the open, and they monetize it. So it is really a big thing. And that's why I am convinced if we ever get the audit of the Fed, matter of fact, this week I think we jumped up about 18 more people joined it. We're up to about 86 people.
Wow.
Have asked for the audit. So if we get the audit and get the books open, the people now will, I think they'll be very open to dealing with the subject in a serious manner of true monetary reform.
Well, Ron, this is, of course, your great bill to audit the Fed, and you've been talking about this, again, your whole public career, but it's something that reaches in the cliche across the aisle, because people like Wright Patman and Henry Gonzalez, you knew Henry Gonzalez, were for this, and I think you have Democratic support in this as well, don't you?
Yeah. When they redistricted here in Texas, they took Lloyd Doggett, who had all of Austin, essentially, and he had no problems getting reelected. So the Republicans gerrymandered him in a district that stretched about 300 miles long from Austin down into the valley, and they made it like 60, 70% Hispanic. So Republicans' goal was to just get rid of Doggett and have a Hispanic in. They knew the Republicans couldn't win. So they did that, but Doggett worked very, very hard to his credit. And he's a liberal, but he's a pretty honest, straightforward liberal. This organization called Campaign for Liberty, who's doing a little bit of work on this subject, they sent out petitions. They got more petitions in Doggett's district than any place else, and he is now on the bill.
Wow.
But even before that became known, I had talked to Lloyd because he's friendly, and I know him, and he's honest, and he was very open to it. He said, let me study it, and he was sympathetic. But that's part of that old Texas populism that exists, and it's still there. I'm sure the Wright Patman district stretched over into that area. So Texas, and I think of the delegation, I bet you I have more than 50% of all the congressmen from Texas, which is pretty
amazing.
Good. And we're going to get
amazing.
More the way things are moving.
Well, Ron Paul, you're the shining light of liberty in Washington, and we all appreciate you, millions of Americans, and it's an honor to have you on the show. And thanks for all you do, and thanks for all you're going to do.
Thank you. Good to be with you today.
You've been listening to The Lew Rockwell Show, produced by LewRockwell.com. the best-read libertarian website in the world. Thanks for listening.